Bonnie Hancock, thanks for being at the AMGC team. Tell us a bit about yourself. Is that an East Coast accent?
Oh, well, I'm not sure. You see, I've been back and forth between Queensland and New South Wales. So I was born in Brisbane, moved to Sawtell, which is on the Coffs Coast at 2. I don't remember that. And at 17, moved to the Gold Coast to essentially pursue the goal of becoming an Ironwoman. So I think it's a bit of a mix of both.
So you started your water sport career in New South Wales, probably as a nippers. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get involved in nippers at the age of 5. Growing up on the beach, Mum and Dad wanted us to be safe. We literally lived on the beach with a little track down to the ocean. So I was really blessed with that childhood. But the reality is, you do see drownings every year and it's important to be safe. So firstly got involved in Sawtell nippers to keep safe, and then as you progress you have the option of the competition side.
Speaking about competition and the craft you're using, eventually ending up on a surf ski. So what happens after nippers? In what gear do you paddle, and what does the competition look like?
So I've got 3 sisters. I've got 2 older sisters, and I think I started a little earlier than other children in getting on a foamy board because I would see them get out there paddling that board and I just wanted to be out there. And from the age of 6 or so, I'd sort of try and grab that board and Mum and Dad would say, just hang on a minute. But pretty much 6 or 7, I was on a little foamy board. They're a couple of kilos, and you progress onto a fiberglass board at the age of 10 and then later a paddling mal. Surf skis back when I was starting, you only were allowed at 16 to get on them. Just with children's growth and development, they're more hesitant. Now you can jump on them at 14, but basically you progress through that level, and the idea is by the time you get on that heavy craft, you're more than competent in the big surf because they can be pretty dangerous. They weigh 18 kilos, the skis.
We're speaking about big surf and long surf in a second, but explain us, what is a surf ski?
A surf ski, so it's, again, 18 kilos. I would say it's probably similar to a kayak, but twice the weight. So they're very, very long. I think they're, what are they in length? You know better than me if you can help
6
me there,
meters.
Jens. I think 6 meters is fair. They're a little bit longer, so 6 and a bit longer than the ocean skis. 18 kilos, about maybe 45 centimeters sort of wide.
So very tippy.
They're very tippy. And to progress into the ocean ski, which we'll get to, the ocean skis are even more tippier, and they're designed for the downwind around 20 kilometres. Your surf life-saving skis are made for 5-minute sprint races. 20
kilometres. Now, Bonnie, the reason you're here today, what did you just do?
I did a little bit more than 20 kilometres.
Tell us about it.
So the Shore and Partners Paddle of Oz is my circumnavigation of Australia. I basically took off from Mermaid Beach on the Gold Coast last December, and I did a big clockwise loop around Australia, which was 12,700 K. I was as much as 500 kilometres out at sea at some times. I was out at sea for weeks at a time, and I paddled my ocean ski, which weighs about 9 kilos, and I got back 8 months later. So I managed to get the world record.
12,700 kilometres, a 10 kilo surf ski, 500 kilometers out of the sea. And it took you 8 months.
Yes, yeah.
How many people have done that before you?
Only 4, and I'm the second woman. So the first one was Paul Caffin in 1978. He did it actually quite quickly in around 11 months. The second man, I believe, took around 12 months. The third was 18. And Freya did it in 10 months and 22 days.
So Freya was the first female who did that?
Yes.
And she had the record?
She had the world record. And what's interesting is that everyone prior to me had gone anti-clockwise. So I took a risk in going clockwise. I did all of the research. I chatted to meteorologists to find out exactly the way the currents move, and I went clockwise around.
So you took the record from the 4th person, a female, and you broke it.
I did. And I was quite confident leading in that I could get the record, but what I didn't expect to happen was how many days we were stuck with it being 35 knots out there, we couldn't paddle. There were times where I was stuck behind an island for a week, you know, with my support vessel, wanting to be out there, and you just can't paddle. In anything around 20 knots or above, as you know, it's near impossible to paddle into. With a downwind or the wind behind you, it's excellent. But from far north Queensland, we got headwinds the whole way down.
So when 4 people before you went counterclockwise and you went clockwise, would you have preferred the other way around in hindsight?
I had a lot of messages on social media questioning the decision and said, why would you change something that had worked? And the biggest one was, well, there were 2 areas. It was the Great Australian Bight, so getting a weather window to cross there. And basically, it's usually running back the other way, west to east. We were lucky enough to get the east to west, but we had to go across 3 weather windows to get it. So we were very fortunate. It's essentially an initiation for sailors. They get across in a couple of days. It's considered an achievement. It took us 15 days. As I said, we were 500k out and the water's black out there. It's quite terrifying most of the time. The other part is the Gulf of Carpentaria. So when you look at the map of Australia, you've essentially got 2 big chunks out of it. The Great Australian Bight, it's 1,000 kilometres across, and the Gulf of Carpentaria is similar. And again, the winds are known to blow against you. But the currents in the other sections, like the East Australian current that runs down the east coast and up the west, the current that runs up the west coast, that's what we were aiming to hit. We were hoping for a bit of luck, and we got it.
From the nippers to competition to paddle 20 kilometers, what made you believe you can do that?
I thought about this the other day in an interview, and I think I had a family that was very empowering without being pushy. And I think that's really important for kids. I think it can be hard for parents to find a balance. And I'm not a parent yet. I can only imagine how hard it would be. But I found that my dad particularly, he was sort of the one who would take us to training, but always, you know, be aware or make sure that we were the ones wanting to go. And I remember I had my bag packed. I was like, let's go, Dad, out the door, you know, drive me to swimming. So they found that balance really well. And I think that helps you with longevity. It helps you love the sport because it's your idea. You're the one who wants to be training. And I mean, from the age of probably 14, I was training twice a day, as was my eldest sister, Courtney, and she's still a professional Ironwoman. And it was entirely our idea. We used to watch the Kellogg's Nutrigrain and watch Carla Gilbert run around. And yeah, we were the ones, you know, getting Mum and Dad going to get us there.
So I see Courtney on the box of Nutrigrain. I hope you feature there soon as well.
Haven't got the call yet.
Well, you got other calls. The average distance per day when you paddle, what is, give us a house number.
It's a really funny one because I was going for 80 kilometres a day as an average to do it in around 6 months. In the end, it was all different sorts of distances. The furthest I paddled we'll get into in 24 hours, but I was paddling 120, 130k most days to make up for those days I wasn't physically able to paddle. I didn't factor in the weather too much.
So that was for a recovery as well as for other circumstances. Did you need to make it to a certain protected bay?
Absolutely. The most frustrating part of the whole paddle was, and in the end I ended up accepting it as part of it, on days you wanted to paddle. So on days you felt amazing, you couldn't because again it was 30 knots. On days you felt absolutely horrific, you've done 10 days straight of 100k plus days. Now 100k, we're talking 12 hours plus of paddling a day, sometimes 14 hours into a headwind. You had to get started and paddle because there would be a big gale force wind coming, and if you didn't get to that island in time, you were stuck. And because right around Australia, the coast is so variable, the winds are really bad in certain areas and better than others. So you've got to get to a certain point before the winds come. So there were days the skipper would say, I'm really sorry, today's a 130k day. And I know you've been vomiting all morning because you're seasick, but that's what you're going to have to do.
What was the longest distance you paddled in 24 hours?
So during the actual circumnavigation, the furthest distance I paddled was 213 kilometres. What I didn't know at the time was that the men's record was 227 kilometres, and I actually stopped that was after 23 hours straight of paddling, and that was an example of where I had to get to the island. So it was born out of necessity more than anything. And I found out after I'd stopped and didn't do that last hour that the men's record was 227.
Which that bloke probably did well rested on a one-time feat, whereas you are just paddling around Australia.
Yeah.
So tell us then about the Project 230.
Yeah. So Project 230 came about post the paddle. So it was when I found out about this 227 kilometre men's, and I'd done the 213 and knew I'd given it everything I had in that. By the time you finish it, you feel like your lips are falling off from windburn. You barely have time to reapply sunscreen, so extremely sunburnt. You are sore beyond words and you just kind of collapse at the end of it. But again, that was at the end of a heavy stint of paddling. So there was something within me that thought, I wonder what I can do fresh. And I knew that there would never be another time in my life where I would be as physically conditioned to sit in that surf ski for 24 hours. It goes beyond your upper body. It's into your lower body being conditioned to sit down for that long. And even just if I was to sit in this chair now as after deconditioning, it would be really hard just to stay still and, do the motion for 24 hours. It's your whole body being conditioned. So I wanted to give it a crack.
How did it go?
It went well. I managed 234 kilometres and managed to break the men's world record.
So you broke two records. That took them, one you took off of a woman who has been faster than the blokes before. And then because you said you were on the form of your life, you took that record as well.
I did, and it might seem like I'm going after, the men's record in that, but...
You're a bit scary, Bonnie.
It was incredible to feel like I could be a part of raising the bar. And so whether that was a male or female that had that overall record, what appealed to me in both of them was this was the overall record. This was the fastest anyone had circumnavigated Australia, the furthest anyone had gone in 24 hours. And from a young age, I've been fascinated in humans pushing the limits. And I believe that when someone has a breakthrough and sets a new standard, it opens that door for others. And we've seen it. We've seen it with the 4-minute mile. We've seen it with what they're doing in the marathon, going for that 2-hour limit. So it's cool to be a part of that, I think.
When you paddle by accident 217 kilometers, in 23 hours and you paddled 230. Did everything go to plan on that day? Tell us about that.
Absolutely not. Going back to the first one, the 213, I mentioned to one of my crewmates that morning, I might go for that world record. So it was 201 kilometres that had been set in flat by a female, and I wanted to beat that. We were in the ocean. I actually got headwinds for the first couple of hours, so my pace was too slow. And after a couple of hours, he said, I don't think we're going to be able to do this. And then it's like the weather window just opened up. All of a sudden you felt a calm, and I had a feeling like I was going to do it. That was 30K in. I knew from 30K in I was going to get there. The day of the 234, pretty much the worst thing that can possibly happen did happen. I tore my bicep 70K in. I got
so 25% of the record in, you encounter a problem which still made you go the other 75%, and you still got the record.
Yeah, it was an entirely different mind frame. I was doubtful. I wasn't sure. I thought, I'm going to, everything mentally, I will put myself in that pain cave. I will push through. But will my body actually let me? And the thing with tears, they start off small and get bigger, and I could feel it getting worse, and it was the worst feeling. I was emotional, I was upset, I was physically gritting my teeth, and my crewmates were trying to think of the best things to say to me and keep me in that positive mind frame. So, and they're very good at doing that. They know what to say, and it's usually a bit of banter, to be honest.
The Japanese writer and long-distance runner Haruki Murakami said once, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Do you suffer or is it just pain?
That's an excellent quote. I love that because I would tell myself that I chose this, it's self-inflicted, and I would embrace the pain. And you get this almost like a high off of it, knowing when you're going further or faster than anyone's been, no one's actually experienced that. So again, it's breaking through the barriers. And I said from the start, a quote I made up one day, I said, the mind leads the body, because if you can keep your mind in a positive state and tell yourself, the pain is a positive thing. It's your friend, because others aren't willing to go there. So if you go where others aren't willing, that's going to be the difference, and that's going to get you that record. And there's all sorts of other things that come into it. Rap music, as I said, jokes, riddles. It's a whole. We had to figure out what worked, and it can be an ugly process throughout. But that beauty is when you break through and you willingly go there.
What was it? What triggered you to take on the feat of paddling around Australia?
I certainly have always been a sprinter, more so, ironically, growing up. I found 50 metre, 100 metre in the pool, the sprint races in surf life saving. It was through reading a book. It was 3 years ago now. I went to my local library. I love autobiographies, and particularly sports autobiographies, and went to Broadbeach Library, and I found a book. It was had a black cover and had a woman with crossed paddles on the front. It was called Fearless. I picked it up as well as a couple of others. It was actually the third book I got to. I read it, and it was about Freya Hofmeister, and it was about her circumnavigation of Australia, and I could not get the idea out of my head after. I was so inspired, but for 6 months I went back and forth and said, this is silly, it's expensive, it's dangerous. She was telling stories about crocodiles and sharks falling for her for 100 kilometres. And I thought of every reason why not to do it, but I just could not. I did not want to get to be an 80-year-old woman and regret not having done it. And that thought crossed my mind.
Speaking about fearless, I happen to know Freya Hofmeister. She is fearless because she made a tandem jump with me, so she certainly is fearless. She's an equally impressive woman like you are. Now, speaking about crocodiles, you carried a slower, heavier kayak with you in order to be protected against some soldiers. Have you had some visitors?
Absolutely. I would love to sit here and tell you that I didn't have an encounter with a crocodile, but I had 3. So basically the crocodiles start from Broome in Western Australia and go right around to Townsville. So even say the Kimberley up top is pretty much an absolute no-go zone with kayaks. Well, only 5 people have done it. I had to do it because there's no other way around it. We knew that our best defence was to stay out deep. So the big crocodiles are in close, they're near the mangroves, that's where they hang out, but they also go between islands. So they are out deep as well, but apparently there's less of them according to the marine biologists.
Has your team seen more crocodiles than you did?
Yes. So because they were up on the boat, so we had a catamaran with us, they would see them. And the scariest moment I had, I did a lot of night paddling. So a lot of night paddling in the pitch black. And I tell you, on days where the clouds are over the moon or there's no moon, you cannot see a thing. And there was one day, they would do spot checks. So the team was shining the torch out to the side. I was like, what are they holding it over there for particularly? And they called me up to the boat. And I was so fatigued. I thought, okay, I'm getting there. It was a week later that they told me that there was a crocodile sitting out to the side watching me 10 metres away. And I told them to not tell me at the time, because if I fall out, that's the worst thing that can happen. And it happened 3 times. They saw them about 10 metres away, and they sit and they don't show themselves unless they want to be seen. That's the scariest part.
How did your daily training look like to prepare yourself?
So it's a really interesting process I had leading in. The first part I should mention is that I put on 15 kilos deliberately leading in. So I'm a dietitian and do a bit with athletes, and I knew it would be impossible to meet the caloric requirements every day, which we estimated would be around 10,000 calories. So I put the weight on knowing that there'd be a time I would lose weight, and I wanted to stay healthy. And I thought the worst thing as a ski paddler would be to be underweight and lose your strength. So I put the 15 kilos on over 6 months. I chose not to tell anyone in that time because I didn't want to have to justify it. And it was quite an interesting social experiment. I realized I had really awesome people around me because no one actually really said anything. The training was only about 20 kilometres maximum in my training. The furthest I'd ever paddled prior was 52K in the Molokai race in Hawaii, but I didn't want to go in overtrained. I thought the worst thing I can do is go in with niggles in the shoulders because that will lead to, can lead to inflamed bursa, all sorts of things. And I think that paid off because I went the whole way around with no soft tissue injuries. But then 24 hours with that record, I got a torn bicep, which showed increasing that pace that little bit more. So it's like I was just sitting under the injury kind of threshold.
With 15 kilos in the tank, for a very good reason, how long did it take you to lose that?
It took me until, so in the Great Australian Bite, I lost 8 kilos in 2 weeks. So I held nothing down pretty much that whole time. I could feel the weight drop off me. I would go to put pants on, they'd fall down. I had to get hospitalised at the end. I had to get IV drips in. I was very weak. That was what saved me. So I lost, I think, around that 7 kilos down the East Coast alone and 8 kilos across the Great Australian Bite.
To get the nutrition into your body, and you said you didn't keep all of that in you. How did you do that? What did you eat? And how did you cope with the rejection?
Yeah. So for the first couple of months down the East Coast before we had, because you got to think in the Great Australian Bite, there were 5 to 6 metre swells. Absolutely enormous, frightening. And I would see that catamaran look like it's going to tip on its side. And you're a couple of days away from help at full motor. But for the first couple of weeks, it was ideal. We had lots of fresh veggies, protein. We had a sponsorship, Binderee did our red meat, lots of fruit, fantastic, lots of good fats. We were able to come into shore and get fresh food from all of the supermarkets. But across the Bite, you're at sea, so your fresh stuff runs out. 5 days or so in, you're onto frozen. And by the end, you're running off very minimal, almost rations. So, but again, I didn't hold anything down. All I held down in the end was ice cream and Milo, go figure. The coldness and the soft texture was what worked. So I was paddling 100K days off ice cream and Milo. Everything else would come straight back up. So every supplement, every good intention we had to do this, out the window. And as a dietitian, that was really hard.
Tell us about your darkest hours.
Yeah. Probably for me, and this is quite ironic, it came quite early on. It was about 5 days in. I was around Coffs Harbour. So at home, it should have been a lovely time. My body was in so much pain, it felt like my back was breaking. I thought, I've mucked this up. I've not done enough conditioning. My back was still adjusting to this huge loads. I was doing 100K a day by then. And I had a moment and I was like, I'm not going to make it. This is just physically, I think my body's going to break down. I thought, just get to 1 month. And I thought if you can get to 1 month, you're further down the coast, you've got all these people invested, you owe it to them to do 1 month. And I got to a month and I was like, I can't let my past month self down. All of that pain, everything I've been through to get here, and I was near the border of New South Wales and Victoria. Do 1 more month. Do 1 more month and reassess. And it became for me about getting to each month. And by the 3rd month, I'd lost that weight. I was so conditioned to being on the ski, and all of the hard work I'd put in made it easier moving forward. It was like I earned that conditioning. And I haven't really told many people that that's how dark it was very early on. I didn't think I was going to make it.
So the preparation was less important than the first 3 months in order to make you ready for the next half year.
You can't possibly train for 100K a day. Mentally, physically, it'd be dangerous. No one's going to sit out there on a boat while you train for 12 hours a day. Not that I know of anyway, but basically I knew the conditioning had to happen in the first couple of months. I didn't know how painful it was going to be.
How did you know that?
from reading a lot about ultra endurance athletes, reading Freya's book and reading how she conditioned over the way, and she lost the weight as well, and Paul Cuffin as well. But Paul went in with minimal weight on him, and when you see photos, he was quite underweight. But they both talk about the conditioning. By the end, you're a totally different athlete. So it was uncomfortable paddling with that weight. I'm used to racing as an Iron woman, you're quite lean. It was entirely different, and it was almost uncomfortable to sit in the seat of the surf ski. So I just knew as well from the caloric requirements, there was no possible way I was going to be able to meet that.
Speaking about darkest hours, you support the Gotcha for Life Foundation. Tell us a little bit about Gotcha for Life.
So I'd heard about Gotcha for Life through our professional ocean ski series sponsored by Shaw and Partners. One of the races they do is to raise money for Gotcha for Life. And I knew it was a mental fitness charity, and I knew they referred to mental health as mental fitness, which I thought was quite interesting. I didn't look further into it other than raising a bit of money, but I knew before this paddle I wanted to raise money for mental health, because through COVID I'd seen people around me lose jobs, relationship breakdowns, and I could see the anxiety and depression in those around me. And I thought there's no better cause at the moment than mental health. Rang Gus.
What's the purpose of Gotcha for Life?
Gotcha for Life. So they basically implement mental fitness workshops to teach people the skills, not only the resources to use and the skills to use when you're struggling yourself, but when those around you come to you. So they're all about talking about the village of people you have around you, and having a Gotcha for Life mate you can talk to about anything. And their bottom line is getting the suicide rate to zero. Over the last couple of years, the statistic shows it's on the rise, and it's scary. It's in the youth age groups as well.
So you picked it, and it was about, you heard about from Surf Life Saving.
Yep. So heard about it through the ocean ski paddling. And Gus Warland is quite well known in Sydney. In Queensland, not as much. So I hadn't heard, the full depth of it. But it was looking into the organisation. So first of all, hearing about it through the ocean paddling, raising money, looking into it. And I loved the terminology they used. They say that you should be able to rank your mental fitness just like physical fitness on a scale of 1 to 10 at any given time. And I think I love that they work in schools. So they're teaching kids from a young age the importance of resilience and knowing how to speak if your friend is struggling, and knowing how to recommend help. So it's a sensitive age group, the youth, and it can be hard to talk about. They do it in a really good way.
Without any doubt, you are a role model for every paddler out there. But what about being a role model for women?
Yeah, I think, it's really nice to hear that. It's certainly, it's not something when you're out there battling these 20-knot winds with your hair flying everywhere, looking totally unglamorous, that you think of. But the messages you receive throughout the way are just lovely and overwhelming. And I hope that what I've done really is a testament to the strength of women, the mental and physical strength. I think there's a lot to be said for women. Even as we get older, there's evidence now that women in the ultra endurance space get better as they get older. And I don't think I personally would have been ready for this in my 20s. I'm 32 now. I think it took until my 30s to be emotionally ready for this. But I just love that I've been part of raising the bar. I think the stigma is really starting to break down, and there's still some inequality amongst pay, sponsorship opportunities and broadcasting, but we will get there. And there's some amazing men and women doing incredible things. And I always say it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you don't give women the prize money and sponsorship they deserve, the performance can't possibly match the men's. But if you do, you will find that performance equal, absolutely. And I hope this paddle's shown that.
I think you went beyond equal. You took a record of a woman and hold the record of the fastest or the longest paddle in 24 hours. What are your plans in going forward to support women, girls in and outside the sport?
Yeah, so I established Pushing Limits Coaching with Danielle McKenzie a couple of years ago. So she just came second at the Worlds. I was going to say the best paddler in the world. Now Gemma Smith is. Gemma's hoping to make the Olympics in kayaking. The women's field is just ridiculously good at the moment. But I established that with Danielle McKenzie. She's won pretty much every race there is to win. And we do workshops and coaching clinics for young girls and women to teach them skills on the ski. But we also tap into things like nutrition, mental fitness. And I'm really, really excited to use that platform to continue to help and hopefully expand beyond that as well. I'm actually down here as well this week getting some training with Gotcha for Life and looking forward to helping women and men as well.
Back onto the water, you had a support boat most of the time, a catamaran, and you had a team supporting you. How did you build that team? What was your requirement for them? Yeah,
so basically my role was to find the boat and my husband's role was to find the team. So we definitely worked as a team leading into it. And for the year, it was just crazy organising logistics and I was organising sponsorship. So he knew two of the guys. They were his friends. One of them is at university and has been involved in surf life saving. The other one has an interesting story and was an ex-auto electrician in the mines and had made a huge lifestyle change and picked up a camera and started doing videography. He then brought his fellow mate who works in film and worked on Elvis recently along. So there were 3 males in my team as well as my husband. And honestly, I could not have asked for a better group of people to follow me around Australia. Through the absolute hardest times, not once did they ever mention quitting. And I would say to them, if you need a break, please tell me, have the break. And they'd never even picked up a surf ski and they adapted. They were doing repairs in the middle of the ocean and helping me mentally in more ways than I can describe. So it was an excellent team.
It looks like you've been supported by a male-only team. Do we see a generational change with the next generation who accept women to lead from the front?
I think so. I kept saying that throughout. I would look up at them and they would be there and we call it Bonnie Watch, where you're watching me out to the side, keeping an eye on me, making sure there's no crocodiles. I think it was really special and I hate to say rare because I hope one day it's definitely not a rare thing, but these men were so empowering. They were a crucial part. I could not have done it without them. And, some of them have sisters, some of them don't. But they just believed in the project and believed in me. And I don't even think they saw it as a male-female thing. It was like, this is the project. This is the person who has to get on the ski for 100K every day. And they saw me for my ability and who I was as a person. And gender didn't come into it, which was awesome.
One day we'll hopefully live in a world where that doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
But until we are there, what is your best advice for aspiring girls and women?
I think, and it sounds cliche, that you can do anything. We need to break through. I know we talk about the glass ceiling and, the reality and the statistics show things like, even with surf life saving, I remember looking along the beach and of 30 coaches, I was one of 2 females. But I think casting that aside and knowing that if you put your best foot forward and putting yourself in situations that can be uncomfortable as well, applying for jobs or putting yourself in front of a panel where, everyone else might be men, but knowing that will help the change. The more we can break through, I think a big one as well is supporting other women. And I'm lucky enough to have 3 sisters who have always supported me. But if we can, as women, lift other women up, that'll encourage other men to lift women up as well. So I'm lucky to be surrounded by men that support women, but I'm also surrounded by a bunch of women who support women. I think that's just as important.
Are your older sisters mentors for you? Do you have mentors in your life?
They absolutely are. I think the 2 people I look up to, well, I should say all 3 sisters. I shouldn't just list one, but my elder sister, Courtney, as an Iron Woman. I mean, to give you an example of the female empowerment, Courtney's had to attend launches where she's the only female. They'll have 6 other males there as Ironmen, and she's the only female. But she'll go there and she'll represent women and she'll be confident, and that's helped to break through. Now they have, say, 3 girls, and there's still that slight imbalance, but she's really helped to sort of shatter that ceiling in that area. And I think witnessing that has been highly inspiring for me. And she's been in some, really hard situations. And unfortunately, throughout the years, there's certain comments and things like that made. But I very much look up to her. And I think Carla Gilbert as well, she was one of the first professional iron women. And at a time where the women were often laughed at on the skis, they pushed through and their persistence broke down, those barriers for us later.
It sounds to me that your advice is to go where it hurts.
Yes.
You've demonstrated that. What are your daily habits? Do you have a set of rituals, certain disciplines? How do you stay on track?
At the moment, I'm adjusting back to being on land. I mean, for the last 8 months, it's a funny one. I've had a really tangible goal every day. So I knew that I had to stay busy. I knew that I couldn't come from this doing 120K a day. The reality is you're receiving lovely messages on social media. Everyone's kind of lifting you up to getting home. All of the lights and the cameras aren't there. The people aren't messaging as much. I knew I had to stay busy, and I really wanted to pursue the Gotcha for Life work. I've been lucky enough to have some different media opportunities, but I've, just been walking and running every day. I think for me, movement is a huge part. And even if that's only 30 minutes a day, I came back and had a bulging disc, so I had to be really careful. I'm not allowed to paddle a ski at the moment, but I'm able to walk and do a bit of running. So movement every day is important, and also getting back into some good eating habits, not having to worry about holding food down. And healthy food's a big one too.
Let's speak about collaboration and partnerships and close to home. Are there any Australian manufacturers who have supported you?
Well, I'm trying to think now. Not that well, in terms of, yes, absolutely there are. Vycobi, there's so many. Vycobi, Ohana. Vycobi do all of the ocean paddling gear. So their quality. So I wore...
Vycobi does the outfits.
Yes.
Are they just Australian or are they good?
Yes, they're excellent. I mean, they're used right around the world. They just won the recent women's and men's surf ski races. But their pair of paddling shorts I wore the whole way around. So I only needed to get a new pair 7 months in, which is ridiculous.
So in other words, better, not cheaper, globally competitive, and they last for 10,000 kilometers.
Absolutely. They said before, we don't even know how this is going to go. They said, let us know. And Ohana were the same with the swimwear. And it was a fantastic test. I mean, I don't know a better test you could do than being in every element out in the middle of the ocean every day.
You had another collaboration and partnerships with Shaw & Partners, which is a financial service organization. Why is it important for Shaw & Partners to support you and support the sport?
I mean, I couldn't have done it without them, to be honest. When you break down the costs of getting a catamaran, fueling it, fueling our jet ski, the boat, feeding a massive crew, we had other people come in and out. It was a huge cost, and we sold both our cars before this trip. I pretty much saved up everything I had. I gave up my 3 jobs, everything into it. And meeting Earl at Shaw & Partners was terrifying initially. He's an absolutely lovely man, but, he's a boss. And that was my game plan. That was my A plan to get them on board. And I know that he loves helping the sport. So I was so lucky. I wouldn't have been able to do it without them.
What's in for the company, not for Earl?
Honestly, it's just the fulfillment of helping people. I think their culture is excellent. They love helping others. They know that they've been really successful themselves. And now their fulfillment comes from giving back. And, he always says he could make this certain money in that time, but he'd rather share that wealth with others and lift others up. And I think you see a lot of successful people do that. They want to lift others up, and Earl's one of them.
Lifting the prize money for women, is that also a ceiling breaker?
It's really interesting to note that. So in ocean ski paddling, the sport, it's sort of like an offshoot of surf lifesaving. For so long, the women have been getting half the prize money. It's actually only in the last couple of years it's changed to equal. So that's how recent we're talking about this difference. It is now equal, so women can put a foot on the line and win $10,000 like the men for winning that race, as opposed to sometimes even less, to be honest, it'd be 10 and 3,000. And I was saying just the other day, I never want a young girl to know what it's like to be on your feet all day. This is while I was at uni, waitressing, trying to put food on the table, you know, getting abused by customers and turning up to training that afternoon to try and put in an excellent effort, and having your male counterparts who've been able to rest all day do the same session because the prize money is so different. I don't ever want a young athlete to feel that difference.
Given that the women hold the records now, I think you should get more.
I hope so.
What's next for Bonnie? You said, I'm not a parent yet. Anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah, it feels like this paddle's been my baby, and I think it will continue to be for the next year because we've got a documentary in the pipeline. I'm going to release a children's book about the paddle soon, and writing an autobiography. So it'll continue in a different way, and I'll have the hair dry, I think, a lot more often moving forward.
How is the foundation going? What was the ultimate goal for you? What to raise, and how far off are you?
I pledged $100,000 to them. I'm at $88,000 now. We've had some recent donations. They're still coming in, and there's some events coming up to raise money. So I don't know if it's typical athlete things. I'm going to get to that $100,000 for them, going to help their workshops.
What would be the stake to make you go around Australia counterclockwise?
I can't think of any amount of money or opportunity that would convince me to go around again, truly. What I would get satisfaction from is seeing, whether it's a male or a female, someone have a crack at my record. And I hope one day it falls, because that'll mean the bar's lifted again, and I would be there every step of the way supporting them because I know what it takes. And it's the same with the 24-hour record. The men are now having a crack at it at the end of October in South Africa, and they said that I spurred them on to do that. So good luck to them. I'll be there supporting every step of the way. So for me, I'm going to let someone else do the hard work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was wonderful.
Thank you, Jens. That was awesome.